Hey everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, Reach Customer Inboxes and Drive Revenue, how to send extraordinary transactional emails that do both. I'm Meredith Brandt, Marketing Manager here at Dispatch by Send With Us, and the moderator today for our webinar with our partner, SMTP. Let's get started. I'd like to introduce today's presenters. Matt Harris is a founder and CEO at Dispatch by Send With Us and has extensive email and product expertise. We're also very pleased today to be joined by Wendy Griffin, marketing and deliverability expert at our partner SMTP. Wendy is an email marketing and deliverability expert who has helped numerous businesses perfect their email marketing strategy for close to a decade.
Hey Meredith, thanks so much for having us on the call today. We're really excited to be here. So first off, I just want to take a look at why deliverability matters. So for your transactional emails. So a lot of people think that successful transactional delivery isn't really important because at that point you already have their business. You probably already received the money in the bank for the purchases that they have gotten from you. But transactional emails are business critical emails. These are your order confirmations, your receipts, subscription renewals, shipping notifications, password resets, and so on. So these are very important emails that your customers are going to be receiving from you. If your email deliverability is poor, it's definitely going to set the stage for a poor customer experience, which of course you definitely don't want to do, and it could lead to your customers eventually leaving. So you want to ensure that these emails are going to be reaching the inbox. You don't want to leave them hanging around waiting for more than a few minutes to get the password reset email when they're really excited and they want to get into their account, or if they're waiting on a shipping notification for something that they purchased from you. These emails are directly tied to your revenue flow, so it's important for you to find a platform that is reliable and does no compromise email delivery regardless of what ISP and what client you're sending from. So sender reputation. Sender reputation is a term frequently used in email marketing, and you've probably heard of it. At a high level, this term refers to the measurement of the email sending practices and how trustworthy your IPs and domains are. Sender reputation is the highest factor in determining email deliverability. Google actually states that that it uses hundreds of signals to determine deliverability, but research has shown that 82% of deliverability errors are due to sender reputation. So you need to make sure that you have perfect sender reputation, or close to perfect. Some factors that determine your sender reputation and consequently impact your email deliverability are, of course, hard bounces, spam complaints, open rates, click rates, and spam traps. Email deliverability nowadays depends mainly on the recipient's engagement and list management of the sender, so it's very important for you to take the time to review your email metrics and clean up your list accordingly. It's also really important for you to scale elegantly. You don't want to go in and add a ton of contacts and just blast them over and over again. You need to make sure that you are adding your contacts properly. Unexpected jumps in your email volume could give off the impression that you've purchased a list, which of course is a big no-no when it comes to email marketing. Also, if you increase frequency significantly, it could also signal spam alerts with your ISPs. So that said, it's important for you to gradually scale your volume and frequency, and it shouldn't set off any alarms for you. It's also very important for you to take a look at your spam complaints and your unsubscribes. As mentioned before, it's vital that you keep a close eye on these metrics. Your spam complaints should not be any higher than about 0.2. If you have any email campaigns that hit a high of around 0.5, you should definitely take a look at your program, stop them, and just kind of review it to see exactly what's going on with it. Take a look at why you could be getting this many spam complaints. It's also important for you to include an unsubscribe message within your email campaign, which most of you already know, but a lot of people kind of hide it, so it's a little bit difficult for your subscribers to see it. So it's important for you to put it somewhere within view. A lot of people put it at the bottom. I've noticed that some people also put it at the top. Also, work with your design team to ensure that you have your unsubscribe message and also a manage preference link. A manage preference link will allow your customer to update their preferences. So in that case, maybe they won't unsubscribe and select if they would like how many emails they'd like to receive from you, or if they would just like to receive newsletters or so on. So go ahead and pop that in. I know a lot of customers don't include that, so it might be something that could be helpful. So it's all in the list. It's very important for you to clean your list. It's essential to any email marketing success. When your number of bounces, complaints exceed the threshold set by ISPs, your message could be sent to the spam folder or even blocked. So once you have your subscribers' email, a lot of people just think, oh, I got these guys, good to go, I can keep sending to them. But that's not exactly how it works. Over time, there are a number of reasons why your email address would go bad. People might leave the company, start a new job. They might just decide they want a new email address and they don't want to check their old one anymore. So it's important for you to take the time to clean your list. A lot of email marketing platforms do include a feature that will allow you to do this, but if it doesn't, just go in every so often, take a look at how many soft bounces and hard bounces you have, remove them, or just try and set up some type of re-engagement campaign to see exactly if you can pull in a few of those people that aren't opening the campaigns, see if you can kind of pull them back in, and if you continue to have hard bounces or inactive customers, just go ahead and pull them from your list. All right, so now we're going to look at dedicated IP versus shared IP. There are many myths when it comes to dedicated IPs. Many people think that having a dedicated IP is a lot better than having a shared one, but that isn't essentially true. Each of them has their own place, and neither of them is better than the other. If you do not send a large number of emails, it's better to be in a shared pool. Why is that? Being in a shared pool of healthy IPs allow you to benefit from the overall reputation of the pool, and it will help get your email into your subscribers' inbox. Also, if you do not send a large number of emails, it's better to be in a shared IP, like I said before. Where dedicated IPs work best, when you have the time to gradually warm up your IPs, it's going to incrementally higher volumes of email. When you consistently send higher volume emails, hundreds or thousands, and you do not see expected changes in the volume, when you consistently achieve high open rates and negligible spam reports or unsubscribe across all your campaigns at time. So there are three crucial to-dos for your email deliverability. So there's SPF, DKIM, and DMARC. So some people have been asking exactly what these are. So SPF defines which IP address can be used to send emails from your domain. An SPF record is a little tiny line of text that the administrator of a domain adds to their .txt record. This line of text is used to tell the receiving SMTP server which hosts are allowed to send mail from that given domain. Then we have DKIM. This is an email authentication method developed by Yahoo that checks an encrypted key embedded in each email sent against a list of public records to positively confirm the identity of the sender. In short, it basically helps the ISPs identify the good mail from the bad mail, and it helps in preventing a malicious email from getting through. So it pretty much works the same way IP reputation does, except it works with your domain name. And then we have DMARC. So while having both of these, SPF and DKIM on a given domain is all fine and nice, the challenge is that receiving businesses don't know is that they should look for those items. Additionally, if both of those fail for one reason or another, it's going to impact the delivery of the email, and the business might not be aware of this. So this is where the DMARC policy aims to help both of these and where it's going to solve the issues. A DMARC policy is included in a DNS record for a given domain, and this is going to enable the sender to specify if the messages are protected by the SPF and the DKIM. The DMARC policy is flexible, allowing businesses to set different parameters and tolerances for non-compliance. So if you're not sure if you're using each of these, you should probably talk with your team or your engineer team to see exactly if you have it set in place and if it's something that you should be including within your sentence coming forward. All right, so I guess now I can go ahead and pass it off to Matt, who's going to continue the presentation.
Thanks, Wendy. Yeah, I think the deliverability side of transactional email especially, a lot of it comes down to ensuring you have the right setup, so the right provider, the DKIM and the SPF. But the content actually plays a huge role in deliverability, especially long-term deliverability, transactional email, especially given how more and more ISPs are looking at it from an engagement standpoint. So obviously, depending on how good your quality of your transactional content is going to impact whether or not your customers are going to want to engage with it, which then impacts your overall deliverability to that same customer or other customers like them in the future. So we're going to break down content, kind of look at all different aspects of the email, everything from the from name, the subject and the body, and even unsubscribes. So let's take a look. So starting with kind of the from name, you're probably familiar when you send an email or a transactional email like this order confirmation from Eventbrite. It's coming from both like the company name, so Eventbrite, and then the email address as well. In this case, it's orders@eventbrite.com. And typically this is going to represent your brand and your company. And like the big thing here is that this has to be just really consistent across the type of sending you're doing. So this one is orders@eventbrite.com, and Eventbrite uses this to send transactional email all about the orders that customers are receiving, which is really important to be consistent there and be familiar. People use this frequently to identify whether or not they want to open an email, because they're looking like, hey, is this correspond to the website or the app I was just using that this order has to come from as well. This kind of should be the standard now in both transactional and marketing email, but you don't want to use a no reply address for the from email. And I'll talk about that in more detail on how that can damage you. And the big thing with the from name, I think, is actually consider how to use this really interestingly. And I think not many companies think about this, but from name is actually a really great way to differentiate between your transactional and your marketing emails. And then even within just your transactional emails, you can use different from names to denote kind of like different streams of transactional email. So for example, all your notification emails can come from one particular from name. And then your orders could come from Eventbrite orders or something like that. And you can kind of use different from names to kind of help differentiate the different transactional streams. And the other factor to think about when you're deciding how to use a from name, what from name to use, is to think about the audience you're sending to. So an example here is like for large consumer brands like an Eventbrite, it's very common to just use the company's name like Eventbrite. But when you think of more in a B2B context, sometimes the transactional emails actually come from a given person or maybe like a persona at the company, or it's really common in the B2B world with SaaS for the emails to come from the team at the company. So you'll receive an email and it's from the Airbnb team or Airbnb loyalty. You can kind of use that to kind of segment the transactional email, and in the recipient's mind as well, kind of segment the channel transactional email they're receiving. And I think this is often overlooked, but this is going to have a huge impact on how consumers end up engaging with the transactional emails you're sending. So let's continue on. Everyone never knows the from address has to be at your domain name. And just really thinking about this here, we've got some examples here on the bottom left. You can use the editor, membership, or welcome at companyname.com. You can use these from names or the from address rather, to kind of segment how you're sending these emails from. You can see this example from Latote. They're using a hi at latote.com for some of their triggered and transactional emails. I would caution against going too crazy. Like not every type of transactional email, like a welcome and a past reset, should all have their different from address, because again, you want to create some consistency in these channels. But if you can create some really basic logical groupings, like maybe you have notifications, like order related emails, and then you have loyalty related emails, that's 3 channels of transactional emails that you can kind of all create a small persona and brand around. That's something that definitely you can do with a from name and from address. That's going to help create a better overall experience with your customer in that transactional email, which is going to accomplish both the goals we're talking about today. It's going to help you increase deliverability through higher engagement over time, as well as it's going to create a better experience for that customer. And over time, they're going to drive more value, engage with your brand more, and hopefully continue to make more purchases. Let's continue on. Let's talk about the do not reply. This is essentially, I would consider like really bad manners in email. A do not reply, what you're communicating to the customer is you want this to be a one-way relationship where you can tell them whatever you want, and they've got no opportunity to respond to you back and pass back anything to you, which doesn't feel really great as a customer. And honestly, if a customer is engaging and opening and interacting with your email, that's kind of a privilege. That's given the amount of email people receive these days. If they're opening and engaging with your email, you should be treating that with care, treating that as a really valued touch point. And so if they're going to respond to it as well, you should be open to that. Now, definitely, there's software and technologies you can feed responses to notification transactional emails into some kind of ticketing system or anything else you're using. Like, you don't need a human monitoring these inboxes, but you should provide a mechanism for them to respond to them. And it goes back creating those different channels for the transactional from names. You don't want to use like no reply at company.com and a no reply from name. That just creates a really bad overall experience. Some brands do this because they want to direct the customer to a different channel to give feedback. So they link to the support portal. I think that's great. Like, you should call out how a customer can get more assistance in a transactional email. That definitely makes a lot of sense, and you can provide a better customer experience. Obviously, if a customer is going to go to a support portal, then reply to an email. But I think providing that fallback option, having it route into some kind of ticketing system, can create an overall better experience, and you're going to get a happier customer through it as well. All right, let's continue on and talk about subject lines. especially in the context of deliverability, a lot of companies get caught up with bad subject lines. ISPs will definitely look at the subject line and look at the content of that. And there's keywords like free, and there's like use of currency in the subject line, which are all related to like spam and fraud subject lines, and that can get you caught in a big trap. So you really want to try to avoid some of these commonly used words that will impact reputation deliverability. And the catch-22 here is that, when you think of free, like there's often subject lines that you might be able to craft that you could use free and seem really great, and seem like they might be really catchy. So the best practices here is always try to use a subject line that's really relevant to the content of the email and actually the purpose of the email itself, right? Like you would never, if you're sending out an order receipt or a notification email, you don't want to use like completely irrelevant content in the subject line. You want it to relate back to your purchase or the notification. Now, the one thing that you can do with the subject line in order to drive higher customer engagement and drive more revenue is try to think about how to make the subject line as accessible as possible to the customer. Now, the example here is if you buy something from most online stores, the subject line might say like your order number and then have a long complicated order number on date. It'll have like 9/30/2018, which isn't like a very like human readable subject line. It's technically accurate. That's my order number and that was the date I made it on, but it's not very human readable. If you compare it to the email you get from Uber or Lyft after you complete a ride, Uber will say, hey, here's the receipt from your Saturday morning ride with Uber. And what they've done there, they've taken that date, that 9/30/2018, and they converted it and they say Saturday morning. And that's like a very small difference, but they've transformed this piece of data from something that's very cold and mechanical about the interaction, and they transfer it into like something that makes a better experience. It's like, oh yeah, I did take an Uber Saturday morning, and it's making it more human and more relatable. I think that's something you can do in the subject line is try to transform the data you're working with on a transactional email and make it more accessible and more relatable to the customer. Next, we're going to look at the little brother to the subject line is called the preheader. If you're not familiar with the preheader, it's something that the ISPs, their inbox providers like Gmail or Outlook started to do to kind of give you a hint of what's inside of the email. So what the inbox providers would start doing is taking the first 150 characters or so of the email body itself and actually show that in the inbox alongside the subject line. And eventually, as this became really commonplace, it became called the preheader in the email world. So you're familiar with this. Here's an example: Weekly Digest, August 6 to 12. And that's the subject line. And then in the lighter gray to the right is the preheader. So customized chat insights from your friends at OLAG. Inbox clients like Gmail will do this automatically. So if you don't work hard to craft a specific subject line, Gmail is going to pull this from the email itself. Now the problem here is that Gmail is not omniscient. It doesn't always know what exactly is the best content. So if you don't set this specifically, you're going to get things where it's pulling in like HTML code or your logo here. Sometimes what Gmail will do is it will go and read what's called the alt text on images. So if you have a logo in an email, it might just pull on the preheader to the right of the subject line. It might just be like logo. So there's some really bad examples here. And because this is being placed in the inbox, it's super important that you have a really great preheader that really complements the subject line and doesn't draw away from it. And so, especially when we're going back to how inbox providers are now using engagement to drive deliverability, you really need to think about how the preheader is going to complement the subject line to help drive that engagement. And the preheader can also be used to help drive interest in actually doing a call to action or clicking through or engaging with that email further on. So it's going to help drive that revenue generating actions in the future as well. There's really great examples where you can use this. The preheader can be kind of cute. You might tease a bit of information. There's an example from Facebook and LinkedIn that I'd like to call out that's kind of interesting. And so Facebook Messenger is an example. Before they launched the full messaging platform, whenever your friend sent you a message, Facebook would send you an email notification, say, hey, you have a new message from Matt. And what they would actually do is in the preheader of the email, Facebook would actually include a copy, like a little bit about what the message text was. So you have a new message from Matt will be the subject line, and the preheader would be, hey, whatever my message was. But when you open the email on the body, they wouldn't actually show you that preheader or any of the content, and just be a call to action to click through and view the message on Facebook. So on one hand, that's kind of sneaky because they tease me in the preheader what the message was and it says, hey, you actually have to open Facebook, the website, to go see this. So that's kind of sneaky. On the other hand, it definitely piques my interest and makes me, I want to see the rest of that message, and I open it up and I'm going to click through. So I think it's a really interesting, compelling use case of the preheader, how you can kind of like tease a little bit and get the customer to come back through and go back to the messenger site or something else. I definitely caution a little bit with that technique in particular, that you don't want to abuse that. In the Facebook example, like it's a little bit cute, it's a little bit sneaky. I'm generally okay with it. There's other examples where that might not be okay. Like if you're sending me an order receipt, I want to see my order receipt details in the email. But it's a technique you can think about and using and perhaps create a really great experience. All right, let's move on and let's talk about the body of the email. The body of the email, that's kind of like that's the meat of the entire thing. And I could really go on and on about the body of the transactional emails and how to make these really great and how to make these really amazing and really how to help use a transactional email to drive revenue. But if I want to focus down on like a couple core items that I think are really, really important, I definitely, my number one belief with transactional email on the body of them is that this needs to be a really great experience, and it should have the same look and feel as the website or the app that your customer is used to using. And the example here I'll use is Airbnb. They're an amazing design-focused company. When you go and you're on the Airbnb website, it's an amazingly well-designed website, and it looks really great. When you finally book an Airbnb, you can receive a transactional email confirming your booking. You open it up, and it has the same look and feel as their website. It's like gorgeously designed, and even like down to like the level of the header of the email with like buttons to go back to the site mimics the same look and feel as they have on the website. It's such a consistent experience. It's really, really great. And in my opinion, that's the bar that companies should be trying to achieve with their transactional email, making it feel like I'm still inside the website or still inside the app. It's such a smooth experience for the customer. They're going to engage and continue on through it. My second thing with transactional email content that's really important, companies fall into a trap of essentially sending a dead-end email. So this is typically a transactional email that customers are requesting and receiving. An example could be some kind of like notification, like your order is shipped. And because it's viewed from the company sending it as kind of like just a perfunctory or like a required email to send, they don't consider like, is there a potential call to action, or is there a next step after this email that the customer might need to take? So let's use that order shipped emails. It's not actually that common for companies to include a call to action back in that order shipped email, despite it being like a super high touch point with the customer. And it's like definitely in a valued point in the customer lifecycle. It's post-purchase, but it's before the customers like receive the product and able to like engage with and enjoy it. And so you want to like maintain consistency in the customer experience and keep them engaged at that point. So you send an order ship notification that doesn't have a way for them to like click through and view tracking, or click through and view the other order details, or click through and just see their account and loyalty status or anything else. That creates a dead end for the customer. And it's almost like you're sending this email and you're asking them for their time to open it, look at it, but then you're not giving them anything else to do with it, even just like a social call to action, anything else. There's lots of options here. So the transactional email, think about how do you avoid these dead end emails, and think about how do I do an audit to ensure that every transactional email we're sending has a logical next step, some kind of call to action we're putting out to the customer. The third thing, and this is really simple, anytime you're sending a transactional email, it's a trigger notification based on an action happening or a notification or a report of some kind. So it's coming from some kind of back-end system that knows about the customer. So this should be personalized. This should be pulling on simple personalization, like, hey, this, use the first name, like, hey, Matt, or hey, Wendy, but pull on loyalty status as well. But, use what you know to craft an experience for me that's as great as, the best experience possible. That's definitely going to help drive more revenue, more loyalty overall from those emails you're sending. Now, I mentioned earlier, like adding like a social call to action or something else in these transactional emails. You can include some marketing content within transactional emails. Generally, you want to keep at least 80%, if not more, of the email content relevant to the transaction or the purpose of the notification. You don't want to exceed that, but you can include some promotional or marketing content as well. And examples of this could be in a order receipt, you're including recommendations on other products, or in a welcome email or something else, you're including referral links or a referral program code to call out to that, or links to your own loyalty program. You can give an example that makes a lot of sense in some cases. So you can do this, and overall, I do recommend this because I think if it's relevant and if you're smart about how you're doing it, you're going to end up providing an overall better customer experience, and they're going to engage you with your brand and continue to purchase more. But keep that 80% rule in mind, and overall keep that, you want to make sure that you're delivering the core value on the core purpose of that transaction email, ensure the customer wants to receive and wants to engage with it. Let's continue on and just look at kind of like the footer of the email. So most people default to that transaction emails don't actually require an unsubscribe link in the same way promotional emails do, and that's technically true, and that's good. But if you're serious about the customer experience and the relationship you're trying to build with them, you can include not an unsubscribe link, but a link to your subscription center is a really great option. And as you get more serious about your email sending you're doing and the volume you're sending and those different streams of transactional email, it might make sense actually to provide some options to, if not completely turn off a type of transactional email, at least meter the amount you're sending. So an example could be if you're sending out any kind of like notification type item based on activity, you can say, hey, don't send me daily notifications, do a weekly notification roll-up, and that'll reduce the volume of transactional emails this customer is sending, and you're giving that option. The alternative, because you're not including an unsubscribe link, is they're going to start marking your transactional email as spam, or just not engaging with it overall, which would also impact the deliverability of it. So this is kind of scary, but by being proactive about this and kind of like owning the fact that like not everyone has the same threshold email they want to receive, you're net creating a better experience, building more loyalty, giving someone a more personalized experience overall, and increasing deliverability you're going to be seeing. The other option too of including a subscription center link in the transactional email is just tell them you can have a section for the transaction manager to say, hey, you can't unsubscribe from these because they are super important, because we're only going to send you the ones about your account or your order, your status that you really want to receive, and just communicate that, hey, these are actually really important, and we're not going to let you turn these off today. Can also be a really great option. So that's kind of breaking down the content of the transactional emails and what we can do to make them really great. I think we're going to turn it over to questions now. Is that right, Meredith?
Correct. Thank you so much, Matt and Wendy. That was really insightful. We're going to answer some of our questions. First one, I'm going to throw at Wendy. I think this should be a fairly easy one for you. What are considered spammy elements within an email?
All right. So, I mean, I feel like a lot of people would have a different answer for this, but for me, I would definitely say that some spammy elements of an email would be just having some spammy words within the subject line. You've probably seen this around before. So avoid spam words. Spam filters are looking for different buzzwords that they can catch to kind of push those emails into the spam box. So a lot of them are obvious phrases that a lot of scammers use would be like extra cash now or 100% free. But there are also some others that could be legitimate. Like a lot of people might want to use, free gifts when you purchase, which could be a legitimate email, but just putting in the word free or order now might kind of trigger. So that could be something to watch out for. Spammers also shorten their links, which can typically look like a spam email to different ISPs because they can't really figure out where the link is going through. So for us, it's important to not include shortened links within the email campaign. Also, always make sure that your customers are signed up for your list. Obviously, if they are not opted into receiving the email, they are going to mark it as spam if they haven't signed up to receive the email campaigns from you.
Great. So we had one that came in. I'm going to point to Matt. It says, as an SMTP customer, how do I leverage dispatch? What is the cost?
Yeah, thanks, Meredith. Great question. Let's talk about the leverage dispatch component, because I think that's really interesting. Sorry, without being too salesy, this is an honest question. So Dispatch is a content platform where we help you do all the things I talked about in terms of building better transactional emails, managing that content, and ensuring you're doing the right personalization and all of those components. Then we integrate with partners like SMTP via API. And so what you do as you integrate and leverage the Dispatch platform, at send time, when you go to send a transactional email, you're using our content management platform and pulling down the content, packaging up their customer data, and then sending it out through SMTP like you are today. So what we augment is the content creation process and ensuring you're going through the necessary steps that I talked about and then Wendy talked about to build out the right content and good content for each kind of transactional email you're sending, and then using components to ensure you're managing those transactional emails consistently and sharing components through all the different types of transactional email you're sending. We'd be happy to discuss that in more detail, obviously offline. I don't want to go in too much detail. That's the high level of how it works.
Great. Gonna pass it off to Wendy. Does it count as an open if someone reads the email in preview mode?
Oh, that's a great question, and we get asked that all the time. So short answer is yes. So reading your email in the preview pane basically does count as an open, because basically what it does is there's going to be, every email that's sent out, it has a little invisible, it's probably like 1 by 1 pixel image that you can't see, and it's added to every email. So once you pop it open in the preview pane, that pixel is going to fire off and it's going to count as an open within your email marketing platform.
Great. Interesting. And on that vein, how can I keep my email list clean? That seems a bit general, but what are sort of your thoughts on that?
Well, kind of like I mentioned before within the presentation, just take some time every so often to go in and take a look at your email list, take a look at how many hard, soft bounces you have, your unsubscribes, and kind of go from there. I actually do some email marketing for Campaigner, which is a sister company for SMTP. So what I like to do is I go in every 2 to 3 weeks and I just take a look at all the different campaigns that I sent out, how many hard bounces, I go ahead and get rid of them, because if you do have too many hard and soft bounces within your account, it is going to affect your deliverability, and it's going to affect your stats when you look at your reports. So every couple weeks I go in and I remove them. If I have a lot of soft bounces, what I like to try and do is resend the campaign to see if it's going to go through, because sometimes soft bounces, when you send it the second time around, it does work. So I just go ahead and try to do that, and then if it continues to come back as a soft bounce or it then becomes a hard bounce, I just remove them. Unsubscribes, a lot of people like to keep them within their email platform, which is fine, but your hard and soft bounce, you should definitely remove them.
I see. What if the email client blocks showing images? Does it still count as an open?
I think most email platforms won't count an open because they are using images for a tracking pixel. But if you have click tracking enabled and the email gets clicked on, the ESP is able to infer from that if there was a click that happened, there was also an open. So despite not having images, you can still track that open.
Great. One more down here. Are there any coding errors that might be delaying email deliverability?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question. Everyone knows that generating HTML email is actually really tricky, and you can't just create a website or a web page and use that in your email. You have to create HTML specific for email. One of the traps you can fall under is what I mentioned earlier with the preheader, where the ISP, like Gmail or Outlook, is going into the email HTML and is trying to fetch out what's the relevant content to put into the preheader. If you have coding errors in your email, that can prevent Gmail from doing that properly. And so it's going to show HTML code in the preheader, or it's going to be blank, or there's other different possibilities. And that's one way that the coding errors can impact that. Other way coding errors can impact deliverability is if you're not including things like alt tags on all your images, that's going to impact deliverability as well. And so there's a bunch of different ways, and this is why you need to use a process to create your HTML email and create your transactional emails especially. You can't just use Dreamweaver or download templates off the internet and go with that. A process and a production platform is really crucial if you're doing high volume transactional email.
Wendy, if you could walk us through exactly what blacklisting means and what does that entail?
Okay, so in short, an email blacklist is basically a real-time database that determines if your IP address is sending an email that could be considered spam. There are a lot of different blacklists that exist out there, and they all have the common goal of keeping spammy emails out of people's inboxes. So that's pretty much exactly it. I don't know, Matt, if you have anything else that you'd like to say on it.
Yeah, I think working with your ESP rather to ensure that monitoring blacklists is really key. This goes back to one of the dangers of shared IPs is occasionally, like if you're on a shared IP, the danger here is that the shared IP could be put into a blacklist based on someone else's sender. So if you're on shared IPs, it's something to monitor as well. And there's products out there that'll give you like a daily report of this as well if it's a really crucial thing. But again, just best practice about not using spammy content or being good about list hygiene, things like that will help you on this. Sometimes things are outside of your control. Like we encountered something earlier this year where someone was spoofing email on a customer's domain. And so despite them having DKIM and SPF and all that set up, someone was still trying to spoof email on their domain. And so for a brief period, about a day or so, one of the blacklists did blacklist them just because of this spoofing issue. And they were able to resolve it really quickly and get it sorted out by working with their ESP. But it's not a perfect science, right? There's error and there's some real bad actors out there you have to be careful about.
Great. So I've got one that just came in. I'm going to pass it off to Matt first and then Wendy. What are suggestions you have for increasing engagement in welcome emails? And this user defines welcome emails as the account has been created, but an order has not yet been placed.
Yeah, I think that's a super interesting question. I think there's two ways I would approach this. The first way is to look at what kind of engagement you're overall looking to increase. And we have kind of this quadrant-like asset that we use to analyze this. But if you're looking at increasing open rates, you want to look at, obviously, subject line. That's kind of like the de facto everyone thinks about. But as well as that preheader. Yet preheader really needs to kind of like tag team with the subject line, give people a compelling reason to want to open that email and actually look at the content inside. And then as well, think about the from name and the from address, but more so the from name when you're trying to drive an open, like especially a welcome email, like you're celebrating someone created this account. So kind of think about the audience, think about how you're branding that welcome email and the from name, and try to create something compelling there. If you're more so on the click side, like you have a high open rate engagement with this email, with your welcome email, but then you're looking at how do we get them click through. It all comes down to having a compelling reason for them to click through. What's the reason? What's the value they're going to get from clicking through? What's in it for them essentially? If it's I've created an account and I'm just going to click through to view the account, I don't know if that's incredibly compelling. But if there's something there that you're celebrating with the customer, there's something compelling. That's what I would try to think about is how do you make this ask, and that's what you're asking with a click through. How do you make it really compelling to the person? That's what I would focus on. Wendy, if you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, sure. So for welcome emails over here, definitely, like you said, it's all about subject line. And what we like to do for our email campaigns is always test it. So just pop in a few different A/B split tests to see exactly what works for your customers. And that's going to really help you build out your email program and help you engage your list. We've done that over here multiple times, and it's definitely been able to help us get more engagement and more opens and clicks. And again, back to the from name, I think it's really important for you to add a personal touch to it as well. So instead of saying, this email is from smtp.com or something along those lines, it's nice to add an actual person. It can kind of just add a little personal touch. So, Wendy from SMTP or Wendy at SMTP, it can kind of help push your customers to open if they know that, there's actually a real person on the other end of that email. When, of course, we all know that it is an automated email, but when you have that there, it just kind of pushes the person to open it up a little bit more.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting point. Some brands like that have loyalty programs will brand some of their transactional emails actually from like the name of the loyalty program members. So like JetBlue has like TrueBlue, and so you can use like that from name, add in like that TrueBlue messaging. I know Starbucks does a really great example. It does this really well with their loyalty programs, and so anything that your customers use to help identify how they engage with your brand, you can then leverage that and use that as that messaging.
Yeah, and I find that a lot of people are more open to opening the email if it's coming from a real person. We did a test over here, kind of giving away our secrets, but we did a test over here a little while ago where we sent out a bunch of different campaigns to our customers from different people within the organization. So we had one from our VP, from our Director of Engineering, one from me, one from Creative, and it was just really interesting to see which ones got the most engagement, and from there we kind of just built out the rest of our campaigns based on the data that we pulled from that test. So that could be something that you could try too.
Great. Okay, I'm going to close it off with just this last question, and it's going to go to Matt. How much is your domain a factor in deliverability?
Yeah, that's a great question. And actually, it's something that's actually changed a lot in the last couple of years. Email reputation and deliverability used to be primarily about IP addresses, and blacklists were primarily about IP addresses as well. And as volume of emails scaled up, it's actually more so focused on a domain-based reputation. So domains are increasingly becoming more and more important. Coming back to email deliverability, how do you think about this is it's really common now for companies to start differentiating their email traffic based on transactional and marketing and lifecycle, and actually using different domains to segment that. So you'll have like notifications.target.com or notifications.google.com or something like that. Like companies are using the subdomain to break out different types of traffic. And that's a really good tactic to help ensure as well that like different business units or organizations within the company that are sending transactional email aren't kind of stamping on each other's feet, yet you're still using like the same sending platforms and IPs for the delivery.
I'm gonna throw one more question in there since we do have just one last minute. And this is gonna go to Matt. What is the best way to track engagement metrics over time? Since these metrics can always grow, no time limit on when a customer can open or click, using week-over-week metrics aren't accurately capturing the performance, especially when implementing a new message or content.
Yeah, so this is a really interesting question. Essentially asking, unlike marketing email, with transactional email, when you're sending out like notifications or something else, it's hard to decide if you send an email today, but that transactional email can get opened today, but it can actually get opened next week, or it can get opened multiple times between now and next week. How do you actually decide when that was opened or when that was clicked? Which is, it's actually really tricky and nuanced to decide what's the metric and how are we tracking the metric. I don't think there's any like best answer or right answer. What we typically do is look at when the email was last changed. So when you made changes to it, kind of like pigeon that as a version of that transactional email. And then what we look at is time boxing when you count an open or click against that email. So there's two ways to look at that time window. The simplistic way is to say, okay, we're only ever going to look at a week's worth of data. So if an email was sent on Monday, we're only going to count an open or click against an email if it happens within 7 days. And that's how we're going to see whether or not that open or click was successful. And the other thing we do there is we backfill the open back to when the email was sent, not to when the open happened. So we say if an email was sent on Monday and it was opened on Tuesday, we count it as an open on Monday. That's kind of just like keep it like more like relative to like the send. The other way to look at this, and this is more specific to the type of the email send, is let's say that we know that between a new account sign up and their first order, it's typically like our average order happens within, let's say, 24 hours. So we're only then going to count open or clicks against that welcome email as successful if the order happened within 24 hours. And after that, we know that this person falls into like a long tail category. So we're no longer going to count the open or click, and we're only really focused on how do we drive the 24-hour open or click against that welcome email, because we know that's the most important window for us to increase. So it's kind of like two different approaches, either picking like a holistic across the board, we're only going to look at it 7 days and we're going to backfill to the send date, or looking at specific kind of email. What's the window for activity on this that is really important, or the average that we see for the cycle, and then only looking at engagement in that specific window. A really interesting, complex talk that I'm obviously happy to talk about in more length afterwards in a follow-up, but that's kind of like the high-level perspective.
That's great. Thank you so much, Matt. Okay, I'm going to sign us off now. Thank you everyone who joined today, and we'll be sending out the recording as soon as it's finished rendering.
Thanks a lot for joining us, Wendy, and thanks everyone for attending today.
Yeah, thanks a lot, guys.